Hi guys, this is Adam Jones, the London Perch Finder. Hope you're well. Thanks so much for tuning in to another one of my YouTube videos and my second lockdown sessions question and answer videos. I've been shying away a little bit from doing videos. It's been a really strange time, obviously not being able to get out on the bank for all of us. And you know, everybody's had their kind of stressful things to deal with, family-wise, work-wise, and I just haven't really had the headspace, and I didn't want to place that out there for you guys and kind of take away from what you guys have been dealing with everything that's been going on. But I think we're going to start getting some information over the weekend about what it looks like in terms of getting back out there on the bank for all of our mental health, to be able to reconnect with what it is that we love to do, which is obviously fishing. And fingers crossed, we're going to find out some information this weekend. Who knows what that looks like? I certainly don't know what it looks like. And I'm not saying that they're going to turn around and say, right, everybody can go fishing. But hopefully we're going to get an outline of what it looks like for the next 3 weeks, 3 months, in terms of coming back to normality for things like fishing, golf, walking, getting out and being active. Fingers crossed we're going to find out some information. So with that said, that's why I wanted to answer this question in today's video. So it's about trout setups. I've had quite a few questions on Instagram since I've been posting some kind of reposts of my season last year. And last year I had a brilliant season on the brown trout. I also managed to catch sea trout and salmon, which is something that I'm looking to target a lot more this year. But I absolutely love wild brown trout. I think they are just such a beautiful species. They fight like stink, they're aggressive, they're absolutely gorgeous. And for me, it probably harks back to when I was a kid. Growing up in the Cotswolds, there were a few options where we could kind of ramble through the fields and some swimming holes, and you'd see the trout taking kind of bugs off the surface and catching them on little worms and hand lining for them with bread. And for me, it was one of the things I used to do a lot as a child. So I absolutely love trout fishing. And coming back into lure fishing has completely reinvigorated my love for catching this wonderful species. So first and foremost, most important thing that I want to kind of point out with all of my videos is that you do not need a BFS setup to do any of the stuff that I'm talking about. I love BFS. It's an awesome way to fish, and more specifically, I love the whole aspect of bait casters. I like casting them super light for the real hardcore BFS stuff, 1.5 grams, 2.5 grams for the trout stuff. And I love casting the kind of more power bait, finesse baits for my perch and pike, as you guys know from my channel. But you don't need to do that. You can do all of this on a fixed spool setup. And if that's what you want to do, get out there and do it. It's awesome. Trout spinning is a really, really cool thing to do. There's a lot more kind of research that needs to go into it. It's quite a closed shop, and with the history and the tradition that we have in this country for fly fishing and fly-only waters and all of the things that we all know exists, I think it's a really good time to go and start the conversation about sustainable trout fishing in this country, potentially. I've got fly setups. This year I've got a 3-weight and a 5-weight. My plan is to be out on those streams where you can do both, potentially with a 3-weight in the bag, or my BFS rod in the bag with a 3-weight in hand, and vice versa. Changing it up as I go through the stream, and using kind of all of the aspects in the bag for catching trout, from dry fly fishing, nymph fishing, right the way through to spoons, jigs, and tiny little crankbaits. So for me, I see it as a way of fishing, and I know that's not the case across the whole country, but the only way that we're going to get to a place where it's seen as the same type of thing is by doing it and educating people on how to do it and enjoying it and looking after the fish. And who knows what's going to happen, but there are plenty of places out there where you can do it with a little bit of research, looking at things like the Wild Trout Trust, going online and looking at certain areas. There's various fishing passports in different parts of the country, and there are trout streams that allow any method fishing. So just get online and try and find one local to you. So let's start with the fixed spool setup. This is the first rod that I ever bought from Major Craft. It was my introduction to Major Craft, and it is the fine tail 2 to 10 gram 6'4", I believe it is. No, 6'2". It's the FSX622L. So it's the light blank. It's stunning. if I'm honest. I've got a real soft spot for this rod. I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels. It handles so nicely across trout fishing, lure fishing in general. Before I had my BFS setups, I was using this on the canal, fishing the Ned rig. It's a wonderful blank, a nice kind of section of backbone in the middle, and a really sensitive kind of action at the top. So I personally love the cork. I personally love the way the Real Sea is, the kind of more traditional looking rod. It's a thing of beauty, but you don't need to have something like this. What you do need to have is a 2 to 10, 1 to 8 fast action rod that you can use for trout fishing. It needs to be soft in the tip. It needs to be able to deal with the lunges. I like a rod that's got a bit of backbone in it because of obviously the perch fishing that we do, but you don't need to go trout specific. Like I said, if you've got a nice light perch rod, you'll be able to get out there and fish for these trout. I pair that up with a 500 size Nasky reel from Shimano, balanced really nicely on this rod. But like I said, you could use a 1000 size, you could use your whatever rod reel combination that you have. As long as it's light and sensitive, you're going to be able to go out there and spin for trout. So I set that up with some braid. This is some Majorcraft Dangan braid, I believe, in about 7 or 8 pounds, and then I'll fish that with a fluorocarbon leader, exactly the same stuff that you would use to fish for perch and pike on the canals and the various rivers around the country. The thing to remember with trout fishing is you are going to be fishing in the lower end of your weight range bracket. So you're going to be fishing in the 1.5 to 2.5, 3 gram weight range. 4 gram at a kind of maximum for your cranks, especially if they're floating and small, they just happen to hold a bit of weight. So you do need a rod that can deal with that. On the BFS side, I've got 2 trout specific rods, but I've also fished my normal BFS rods for trout, and they work perfectly well. So if you already have a BFS rod, again, this isn't a barrier to entry. These are just specific trout rods that you can kind of get into as time goes by. So this is my fine tail area stage. So fine tail range is the kind of Majorcraft top of their range in terms of trout rods. They've got a range called the Troutino as well, which is slightly cheaper and still wonderful rods. And like I said, it doesn't have to be Majorcraft. There are loads of options out there. So this is the fine tail area stage. This is a really cool little rod with a super parabolic bends to the butt. It's designed for area stage fishing in Japan, which is basically trout fishing on lakes, where they use small spoons, 1.5, 2.5 gram spoons, and they're looking to be able to take up all of the lunges of the trout and obviously bring them back in competition style area fishing. And then I've got what is, I think, my favourite rod, potentially out of all the rods that I've got, and I've barely used it. It's this fine tail travel rod. So it is a 1 to 8 gram ultralight blank. It's 5 pieces, so it's 4 pieces with a splintered joint section that you can put in to make it longer. So it fishes at 4'6" or 5 foot long. It has all of the things that I love about my my original fine tail, that kind of wooden reel seat and the cork, kind of metal trigger grip, the green and gold on the fine tail. To me, I don't know why, it's just got a soft spot in my mind for the first rod, obviously, that I got when I got back into this lure fishing scene. And this one I'm just really excited to use. So I'm excited to be able to take it apart and obviously pop it into my bag with a little fly rod and stick it in a rucksack with a bag on with a net on a magnet and a set of waders on, you know, sandwich and some drinks, and just set off into the wilderness searching for trout. That's my kind of romantic version of how this season's going to look, and I'm really excited to try that rod. So reel wise, again, I'm fishing the BFS stuff with my older Baron. I've got a fluoro set up as well. I want to try and fish a bit more fluoro for trout. I'm not so concerned about the kind of feel of the bite, so I'm going to give it a go, see what happens. Obviously the benefits of not having to tie leader knots and that type of stuff is there. And I've also got my new Daiwa Air TW, my rather naughty present to myself. Really excited to give this a go. I've had a little go in the courtyard, and I'm amazed at how easily this casts a 1.5 gram jig head with nothing on it. So pure 1.5 grams. It's just awesome. So I'm really looking forward to playing with that in a real world scenario. I think in a courtyard you don't really get a proper feel, and you don't mess around with it quite in the same way. So that's exciting. So fixed spool wise, 500, 1,000 size reel, 2 to 10, 1 to 8. Same with the BFS rods. You've got obviously 1 to 8 travel rod. This is a 1 to 5 gram area stage. You could fish this on your 1 to 7 gram BFS rod. You want a reel that can cast the weights. This is where, you know, the more specific trout BFS reels are going to come into play. It's not just a finesse bait caster that can cast 5 grams. We are really looking to cast light lures for these fish. And then you're ready to go. So you need some braid, you need some fluorocarbon, which you've already got in your bag. And the next thing is some micro jig heads, which likelihood is you've probably got these knocking around for your perch fishing. So I like to fish 1.5 gram. These are Major Craft 1.5 gram jig heads, right the way through the 2 gram, 3 gram. I've just got some standard Spro Freestyle 2 gram ball weighted jigs, small hooks. I've got some kind of darting Major Craft jig heads in the 2 up to 3.5 gram range, and I'll fish those with small kind of micro fry type baits. I really like these jig para worms from Major Craft, something that's small and the hook point sits kind of very close to the back of the bait, because you'll find that the trout start to kind of nip at the tail on a lot of lures. So you want something nice and small, fine wire hooks, and those are the kind of jig options that I carry with me. I also really like these spoons. These are Spro Incy spoons, 2.5 grams. And I've got kind of 1.5 options as well. Fished with a single hook again. And this is something for me that I think is really important for trout fishing. We're catch and release. It's all about the sport and obviously seeing these wonderful fish and releasing these wonderful fish. And I think single hooks give us the best chance to do that. And be as kind and as sporting to the fish as possible. So for me, I've made the choice to only use single hooks when it comes to my trout fishing. I've bought Gamakatsu single hooks from Top of Manor. I've got some Daiwa single hooks here. I've got some Spro Freestyle split ring pliers, and I've changed over any crank that I'm going to use for fishing for trout. I've changed over to a single hook. So you can see there, that's one of the Major Craft Zona minnows with single hooks on there. I've changed my Rapala X-Wraps to single hooks. And I've got some new baits that I've just picked up from Top of Manor, which are these Lucky Craft minnows and some Spro jointed cranks, again, that I've just picked up today. All of these are going to have single hooks. Just based on the way that a trout takes the lure and the way that a trout fights. They're very delicate fish for starters. They go absolutely crazy. They smash the lure. It's very aggressive. They turn on it. They go airborne almost instantaneously after taking it. And having single hooks flying around, treble hooks flying around, can put them into some pretty sticky situations, which are A, very difficult to unhook, and B, can cause some damage to the fish, in my opinion. So I'm going down the single hook route. It's really easy to change them. And yes, you might bump a few fish. I've not found that my catch rate changes too much, but what I have found is my release rate and the way that the fish is hooked is so much better than with treble hooks. You don't have those horrible moments where you're spending too long unhooking the fish and obviously then spending ages getting the fish to go back. So for me, single hooks, same as if you're fly fishing, small single hooks on the back of spoons on all my crankbaits is how I've got it set up. So that's what my trout setup looks like. I've got a small kind of shoulder bag with a set of waders and a trout kind of clip-on magnetic net that I can wade with. Those are the only things that I've bought specifically away from my perch stuff to make that just slightly easier for me. But apart from that, get out there, give it a go. It's an awesome way of fishing. They are unbelievable fish. I'm sure you're going to love it. Make sure you do your research on the spots. Make sure you're not going against any bylaws in doing so. If you do your research, it's a really wonderful way of fishing. Hope you enjoy it. Please let me know in the comments if you've got any more questions, anything you'd like to see on the trout side. Obviously, when we're let out, I will get out there and give it a go. But I hope you guys are well. Please like and subscribe, as I've said before. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.